Sorry to keep you waiting, folks. I'm the one with the runny nose this morning. So, let's just check. Can everybody hear my voice clearly? And again, you can hear Geshe all right? Wonderful. And the video looks like it's okay, so let's get started. So first of all, Tashi Dele greetings to all. Geshe hopes that all is going well and that you are happy. So, of course, we are all gathered together today for the purpose of recognizing the seeds, that is, the positive seeds that all of us have within us, and then creating the causes for those seeds to ripen or for those seeds to sprout. So, in essence, we can look at our discussions in these classes together as like putting a little bit of water and fertilizer on those seeds so that we create the conditions for them to be able to sprout. So then in the Sutra on the Four Foundations of Mindfulness, one of the instructions that the Buddha gives us is to try to mix our mind as much as possible with loving kindness, to try to bring forth or generate loving kindness in a very stable way. The Buddha explains that when we are able to do that mindfully, then we will also experience physical benefits. The winds or the prana, the energy that moves through our body, will be purified, the blood will be purified, and we will experience a greater sense of physical well-being as well. And so as we bring forth this mind of loving kindness, we bring forth a mind of loving kindness which is in complete equality, right? We don't want to be distinguishing or discriminating according to race, according to religion, or something like that. In this way, we become a person who strives to be of equal benefit to all others. And we know that such a person is a source of inspiration. We know that people who work for kind of all human beings without discrimination, even if we see a picture of such a person, right, we feel enlivened, we feel inspired. So such a person who doesn't distinguish, doesn't discriminate based upon religion, based upon gender, based upon race, and strives simply to benefit every single being who they encounter, such a person is an inspiration to the world, right? Even just merely through seeing a picture of such a person, beings feel at peace. And if we think about all of those benefits, right, then we will be encouraged to see that if we put forth the effort, we have all of the tools we need to bring forth the mind of metta, of loving kindness within us, and to be able to maintain it in a stable way. And then building on this discussion then, it's important to recognize what is the main obstacle to loving kindness, what can degenerate this mind of kindness, and also what can weaken the merits that we accumulate, right? And this mind, this difficult mind, is the mind of anger. Yeah. So we put in a lot of effort, right? We accumulate a lot of wholesome karma or positive potential. But then along with that, we are encountering minds that can diminish some of the power, some of the potential of those merits. So the scholar practitioners, they actually indicate that if we kind of contemplate this, if we think about how the mind of anger is functioning, then we can see, right, how it is possible, how it actually functions, that anger diminishes the power of our merits, of our wholesome potential. So, in the sutras, right, in the collected discourses of the Buddha, this is given as a principle, but the mechanics of how, anger actually degenerates the merits are maybe not fully explained. But many subsequent scholars say, right, that with a little bit of kind of reason and contemplation, we can understand a little bit about how that functions. So if we want to kind of try to contemplate that, think how is this functioning, that anger degenerates merits, we can start with this simple proposition, that the result of virtuous or wholesome karma is happiness, and that the result of unwholesome or non-virtuous karma is suffering. So let's think about what happens when this mind of anger manifests within us, right? It dominates our mind and hinders our ability to experience happiness. When we're angry, we're not going to be able to experience happiness. So we can see clearly that it is hindering the results of wholesome karma or virtue from manifesting. So this is something we can see directly, isn't it? That when anger is arising within the mind, it is directly hindering wholesome karma from ripening into the result of the experience of happiness. We can see that logically and very directly. Yeah. So if the mind of anger, in the moment that it manifests, prevents us from experiencing the resultant happiness that comes from wholesome or virtuous karma, then for sure we understand that in terms of the future ripening of wholesome karma, it could also hinder that. So that's the principle. So this is the kind of analytical meditation that we want to engage in, because it is something that is going to help us comprehend that topic of the disadvantages of anger, right? And it's clear that if we become kind of convinced about the faults or disadvantages of anger, then it's going to be much easier to bring forth patience, much easier to bring forth love and compassion. Yeah.
다 텔 나로서 그 다가로 파 레치테하고 소노토네 레치테하고 라가체바 이나스.
So then, if we want to think about the faults of anger from another angle, let us assume that somebody says something unpleasant or abusive towards us. The immediate reaction we have is to respond, right? To respond to those harmful words with harmful words. But if we give a response, what's going to be the outcome of that?
어떤 소노토요 말마도 대다오 노아 첨보지 시오요 알세요레스.
And it's really important to think about this situation because actually it's really easy to make a mistake.
빼나 멋지게 던져지라.
Jinro.
어저 치키나레 다 샤이나레 가리나 강에 되게요나. 나도 아니 던지 강에 돼서가 예텔라. 콘도 사거레베스.
So let's begin with this with an example. If we see somebody hitting or like otherwise abusing some kind of animal, like a dog or a bird or something, do we get angry with the animal because of the harm that it's experiencing?
나도 던지게 던져텔라 콘도 파세자니 나도 숑바도 이지시에가 와스. 콜마티 강에 되게요 와스.
Not only would we not get angry at the poor animal, but in fact, we would be naturally inclined to feel love and compassion for it because of the harm it's experiencing.
다 텔소노토네라 페나 머지가로 솔로히네레 콘도 네츠테비가라. 니네체는 가로서 못텔 콘도 파마사와제 숑바도 이지시에가 와레스.
So we need to extend this example to thinking about the person who has said something unpleasant to us. In fact, rather than getting angry at the person who has said the terrible thing to us, we should actually feel love and compassion for them.
가르레스는 콜 강에 되게도 스레스는 연다지가 콜 강에 되긴데요.
Why is that? Because the person who said the unpleasant thing to us, they are actually being sort of abused or controlled by something negative.
하고서라와스 오다 콜 로맨 콘도티 콜 네바시기 와레 데이자 콜 콘트롤 마사와지 얘네들은 숑바고 니지고 나도 레ঙ네 저기는 컨트롤 레테 그래서 와레스.
Why is this the case? Because behind the unpleasant thing that person said to us was the mind of anger that was deceiving them, that was abusing them. And it is because of this. Sorry, I see that my default microphone has changed. Can you still hear me just as clearly? Okay, good. Okay, then it's nothing to worry about. Okay, so sorry. Where were we? Yes. So the anger functioning behind, right? It is controlling, right? It is affecting that person who said the unpleasant words to us. So for that reason, right, we shouldn't be getting angry at the person who said the unpleasant thing, but rather the anger that compelled them to say it. So our issue is we misunderstand the source of the problem, and we think that the source of the problem is the person, right? Whereas actually the source of the problem is the anger that's operating in the background. So when we think about it in that way, there's many reasons through which we can comprehend the disadvantages of anger, right? It's not such a difficult thing, really. So we want to bring forth this mind of loving kindness as much as possible. In order to be able to do this effectively, then it is important to comprehend the minds that hinder that loving kindness. So all of the holy beings, the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, they all make it very clear, right, that the source of lasting happiness is this attitude of loving kindness.
다 들으시랜드 당가 좀 거좀 해서 있어.
So then, as we begin the next part of the session, let us take a moment to relax the mind.
새들 유튜브 강가 좀 맞춰서요. 선바치네 레레디야.
And so,
새들 유튜브 아재 강가 갈라카와.
so relaxing, let us bring the mind, let us bring the winds or the prana into equilibrium.
유아시 찬용 바탈 레레서요 선바.
The four elements come into balance.
대응 보고 추슈하고를 따와 노지로 소소 품봉한테 간지 시레도 내가 가르치고 슈슈 따네 레레치네 돼야지.
Like a child who walks into a beautifully ornate temple and just appreciates the whole sum of the temple and its parts with wonder, with awe. Just to gaze at the five skandhas, the five aggregates as a whole and comprehend how they work together.
품봉가에는 레카치기 쪼지데 다 선반드시데 레베 다 같이 모두 다 들으시래 선바치.
And then think that within those five aggregates, one of the more prominent in our experience is the aggregate of discrimination.
디시베제 야보 돈에 다른 제 세제 스도 설다와 이나요 세 야보데 좀바돈 이지가 술로 다 넣어야 같이 모르는데 선바로.
So we want to use this aggregate to discriminate the right things, how thinking that both self and others, without discrimination, are worthy of happiness and correspondingly bringing forth love and compassion for all.
세종지 뚜마야 보테다 이지금 머리야 시와다 여와시의 선바치.
So think I'm going to build on the pure luminous nature of the mind and use this as the field for bringing forth complete compassion.
롱도 롱게 안에 생제제 보난로아리 주고 생제 요조 내가 타다더잖아 저마르 손베토네 보다니지야 해야지.
So think myself, others, all sentient beings. How wonderful it would be if they were separated from the causes of suffering and from suffering. May they be completely separated from suffering. Bring forth immeasurable compassion. Think, I myself alone will separate them from those causes of suffering and from that suffering itself. Bring forth the pure intention. Think, just as the Buddha, Venerable Tara, and so forth started out as ordinary like us, but brought forth this mind and perfected it. In the same way, if I try, I can definitely follow. In order for this to manifest with single-pointed concentration, focus, and faith, I make requests for blessings of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Let us do the recitation. Tumbo jom den de jin je ba ra chom ba yon da ba zo be song ge je ba dang sha su den ba Dewar Sheba Jite Geba Kebudu Vekalo Gyurwa Lana Meba Lada Minangi Temba Sangye Chondende Begyawa Shagya Tubala Chazelo Demba chondende teje sheba chachomba yondaba zobe songye sheba dan shabsu demba dewa sheba shiten chemba kevu dewe kalo jowa lana mepa ladon minangi demba songye chondende pejawa shaja duba la chanzelo chedu kyabsu chi Temba chondende tejin sheba dajomba yandaba zobe songye sheba dang shabsu temba dewa sheba shiten gyamba chebu dewe kalo gyorwa lana meba ladam minangi temba songye chondende pejawa shakya duba la chazelo chedu kyabsu chi The prayers to Guru Rinpoche. Gen yogi no jamsa pema gesa dombola yazen jogi ngodrup Pema june Jesu Kodu kanjo mambe ko ke
Dusum Sangye Guru Rinpoche Gunda Deva Jembeja Baje Gunze Dudu Jabo Se Solvadesu Jinji Radu Jinang Sangwe Bache Shiva Dan Sambalungi Nrubal Om Benza Guru Pema Siddhi 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 Saji Chigi Saji, sorry. Don't know what happened today. Saji, Pegi, Joshi, Meto, John, Rira, Linji, Jiden, Gambadi, Sange, Shindo, Mide, Buwagi, Drogo, Nanda, Jinla, Jeva, Sho, Idam, Guru, Ratna, Mandala, Kandirya, Dayam. Too much coffee this morning, Geshe said. All right, so refuge and bodhicitta. Chudan Tsoki Chunan La Chanchu Badu Dani Kyasu Chi Dagi Chunyen Gibe Sunan Ji Jola Penchir Sanje Joba Chudan Tsoki Chunam La Chanchu Badu Dani Kyasu Chi Dagi Chunyen Gibe Sunan Ji Jola Penchir Sanje Joba Chudan Tsoki Chunam La Chanchu Badu Dani Kyasu Chi Dagi Chunyen Gibe Sunan Ji Jola Penchir Sanje Joba
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh yeah, that to me shawa kanunganigal ta pembi to ngayon pembi to dawana chiri.
So then when we speak about bringing forth the activity in the beginning, which is the motivation, we often talk about the power of force or the power of projection.
Oh, ta senji yuzula ta pemba digi. Oh, ta di chedinga lega chigi seneta sono jachembo leva kana se goshini.
So we want to think, I'm going to work for all sentient beings for their benefit. In this way, we establish right away a vast mind, an encompassing and powerful mind. Yeah.
No lega ravas.
Yeah.
No so lead se kale khade ona. No so go jane te so yo amare se res.
Ale loso. Yeah.
Kale
Kanaleka gijela kaleka. Sorry. Thought it was esoteric, but it's a pretty simple principle. So one of the things that is kind of advised for meditators is, for example, if we've just returned home, right, from a long day, or we have to walk like a long distance from work or whatever. And when we first come home, when the body and mind are still tired, this is actually not the time to begin the meditation session.
Oh, ta pele inare darusale inare ta go jake suina ho ta kata la chimbo jan lil se rajan roga was hot ka le ni go java ina lit se u kala khadya isa ya bo yung mundu se yares.
So a lot of people, also who meditate in the mountains above Dharamsala, and also, in old Tibet, especially there, because, when you're going somewhere, you have to kind of ascend and descend all of those mountain passes if you're going on a long journey. So they said if you're returning after kind of ascending a mountain pass, then is not the time to begin the meditation session right after you return, right? Because the body and the mind are not in a good state for that.
Ota nojini kawaina lordo kawaina luru gutu peche to ne kecha mobashi yare ota teji jitse chembore disares.
And sort of to bring this into balance then in the Lamrim, in the stages of the path, and in other teachings, the 9-point breathing is something that is really emphasized, and there's a reason for that.
Shato tane lula tene tane ngendro ga ta pagel ludo se tsoma za la yon leka che yares. Ni ji kala yon tingen ze tembo de yon ula tene de yato. Ota ni ji la yon le mo yares yares.
So related to the breath and the wind, right? We talk about establishing that equilibrium of body and mind, that balance. So that's at the beginning of the session, right? The preliminary, doing that. But then when we come to the actual session, let's say, for example, we're cultivating single-pointed concentration or samadhi. This is something that is very much related to the winds or the prana. So it also is very important there during the actual session.
Donga ni ke kali ina yon tane sela maybe tingen ze sa ka chembo tsu yare tene ina yon se do lulu maybe tingen ze sa de kaparichi ke sana. O ta teze tempo mena teze kale kawres tingen ze de.
Ale younger something yapo komasu.
Chato sela maybe tingen ze sa de donga kawaina ka chembo tsu yare.
Semla tene tingen zen drobia.
Sela me ni tingen ze de.
Right.
Ya sela mi pa season.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Then ta ina yon kepasu ta wa ina se do ula tene tingen ze de ate lila wo yama teze kale yare.
So if we look at it from the perspective of sutra or tantra, and here we're talking about samadhi or single-pointed concentration, right? Achieving single-pointed concentration on the object of focus with the mind is something that is said to be, it's still not easy, but easier than developing a single-pointedness of concentration using both the subtle wind and the mind to hold the object.
Ota jise karre sana pena sese na o kon zu ju sa shira yamar wa toya yamar was te me isa o ko ido kato do tandigo sono to me isa ko mi pa sono ta lila wo yamar se des kale suji
sorry pet truksas ngene chane this so ngema lagore mato dik tes kale kabodi nanso ngema nge tes ku nga kechijigo nanso di semdang lungdi nanso sem tes lelawa semdang lungyam du tes kalekawa dida wo chikson ene karisun sta
se to sela me bitinga ka chembo tsu yares do duma kala ta ina yu kepa so sena se do ula tene tinga de ate kale kawa yares
koma son kepar nune chane koma
nika
son
kale kawa yares sela me bitinga zo ula me bitinga zo se ate
niga kale kawa yene ne kepar karete. Sorry, I'm not clear on what he's trying to share with me at all.
Mishato de yares ina inika kale yares chaba ki yo se sigma du ale tombo
Loso. Okay. All right.
So,
it was like a comparison, but it's not really a comparison.
Me chaba kare resen yed. Suji ko do.
Yeah.
Ta tandi ina me ko toya yo ai i du zo ta du yo wa.
Yeah.
Te le la ga was.
Ale.
U do se se ate.
Teningan so sem rangi migja migul sona. Nganso u rangi migul sona. Yeah, these simple indus ngala so tamane. Okay, so sorry guys, but he said it's always unclear to me. I admit that freely. So anyways, so the difference is, so I just misunderstood. So I thought you're using we talk about using the wind and the mind to focus on the object, but that's not the angle that Geshe is going from here. Geshe is talking about taking actually the mind or taking the wind or prana as the object of meditation itself. This is said to be more difficult than, for example, he's still a little bit cheesed for using this is still a little bit. So this is more difficult than taking an image of the Buddha, for example. Why is this the case? Because an image of the Buddha, that's kind of a pinpointable mental image that is kind of easy to facilitate bringing forth in the mind. If we talk about the mind or we talk about the wind, that is something more difficult to pinpoint. Yes. Right. So with the mind, we can't talk about the mind having a particular shape, color, or something like that, right? And so therefore it's difficult to pinpoint. If we take the breath and we connect the wind to the breath, then the breath is something that is rising and falling, right? So in that way, it's not a stable object, it's a fluctuating object. So for this reason, these two could be more challenging than that image of the Buddha, for example. Right, right. And also, though, it bears repeating that when we speak about using the Buddha or Tara or Manjushri or whatever enlightened figure you want as your object of focus, the practice of meditation is not staring at the statue or picture, right? We want to think that the enlightened being is really there, and we want to bring forth an image of the holy body within our mind. And we enliven that visualization by thinking that, for example, the Buddha, in order to benefit myself and sentient beings, is appearing in the space in front of me. And then you develop the feeling that the Buddha is really there. And on that basis, you develop your concentration with the mental image. So let us take a moment to relax the mind, and we're going to start just by observing the breath. So we're going to try to count, try if you can, 10 inhalations and exhalations. So the way you count it is this: breathing in, I'm aware I'm breathing in. Breathing out, I'm aware I'm breathing out. And those two awarenesses count as one. So as we focus on that, think if there's any other like thoughts or feelings that arise, just observe and let them subside. You can think about some minnows beneath the surface of the water of a still lake, some small fish. They flit, they move, they swim underneath the surface of the water, but they don't disturb its surface. They're there one moment, and they're gone the next. Just as those minnows swim away, they're no longer there. Just like the bubbles on the surface of the water dissolve, these thoughts are fleeting and need not disturb us. The body and mind are pure, relaxed. The mind is clear and focused. I'm going to tap into the mind's potential. I'm going to activate it. And in this way, I can achieve great purpose and meaning.
So me tung de ro ma ye kan ji na ani sen je ten ro yin na ro ri tu kan ji yin na yo so chen di nian nu ji ta za chi mo ji do o da ya bo yin so much.
On the basis of this mind, I think of all sentient beings, of those close to me, of those not close to me, of humans, of animals, of all 6 types of migrators within samsara. Based upon this vastness within my mind, I cultivate a feeling of closeness to them. Every single one of them is connected to me. There is not a single one which is far away.
요즘 펜바 타투 돼야 뭐 강에 요즘 세야 저는 타투 대시 돼야 다 나로 롤을 랭게 대체도 다 손지지 공부들.
It is my responsibility, because I am connected to every one of them, to be able to liberate them from suffering, to be able to bring them to happiness. In order to be able to do this, I must achieve Buddhahood, bring forth bodhicitta.
롱 예이나 요 템바트 바로 지트 요 말에 세도 시에 대이나 요 지트 바지 매아이자 다 땡데서만도 지트 토르레 소마지.
Self and others do not exist inherently. Similarly, afflictions, positive mental qualities are not truly existent. Because of this, then, true progress, actualization is possible.
말리야고 매일 레바야고 디 토르다 세 기월다 레레 지네다 여보 강간저 토바서 소마지.
Based upon this human rebirth, this human life, and intelligence, cultivating in a relaxed way, I can definitely achieve what I have set out.
Chila kachamo teji ten karsi tni shikarta kenza oya ta soma no ji ywa ta diri mi sa ba ji ta ke je shi ywa te yin mi ji ta so teze to te kares.
So really, to be able to kind of achieve all of the things we want to, right, according to what we are learning in the text, it's important to cultivate our mind in stages like we just did. So Geshe really encourages you, to take that into your practice at home.
다시 요 동바 코러스 간디진 요 앞에 요 바다 다 대만데 시작이 요 이니 메진 간주 다 강가 말해 되는 같이 뭐 지대스 냐고 요.
So the holy beings, they explain to us how they got there based upon their own experience. Now, of course, it's not guaranteed that every part of their experience is going to be relevant to us, but we have to take those parts that do resonate with us, those important points, and try to cultivate them.
어딘지 같이 다 가서 되는 미사 다 단단하죠.
So we are still in the freedoms and advantages section of Words of My Perfect Teacher. So if you have this edition, which is the Padmakara translation edition, we are on page 34, right at the top of the page with the quote from Nagarjuna.
오다 같이 뭐 틀을 다 가져 짜와들 내서 주요 와스 주는 단전 내가 그치 동보들에 되는 건서 다 말래 돼요.
Yeah. So Geshe said that this text begins with sort of 6 important points related to one section of the preliminaries. One of those is the freedoms and advantages. And so we are now coming to the end of the explanation of that point.
오야 된지 같이. 오야 다 가져 걸어서.
Gompo Lunju gi ganso cheryeng nyeshing bu dang. Rube tegarang.
이노.
Gyacha gya tambaso tsai.
연벌을 저게. 연벌을 저게 어디인지 왔다.
Jipjichi.
자초 체 냐시 버가도 리바 체바이 조 던롤레 머니 체토 가이 몽게 돈치 셰베 덴리 침반제 제 야보 데샬라 domba동.
So reading from the text now, Nagarjuna expresses this in his advice to King Surabhibhadra. It is highly unlikely that a turtle might by chance arise through a yoke tossed about on a mighty sea, and yet compared to animal birth, there is far less chance even than that of obtaining a human life. Accordingly, O Lord of men, practice the authentic dharma to make your fortune fruitful, right? So the Lord of men is the king who he's addressing there.
어다 손지근 노근의 이나에 가서 빽깔에 가오신 릴라 어찌 만디와 뺑이네 요비께 자마는 가솔라사기 바스 빽다 코로
루베디로
뺑이네 요비께 자마레 빽던지 야바 이나스 요나스.
So Geshe said, please remember, because we started on this analogy of the turtle putting its head through the yoke actually last class. And Geshe is reminding you that he explained that this comes from the sutras, from the discourses of the Buddha. But it is not something to be taken literally, like there literally has to be this special kind of blind turtle that only comes to the surface every 100 years. It's an example. So they're using it to make an evocative example, but it doesn't necessarily follow that there is that kind of turtle in the world.
어떤 노근의 이나래 gemboldo 이나래 수진이 반다고 수지 공부 돈을 그 양일랜드네 로지자르 로지자게 지는 gemboldo 배워냈어.
집자 급자이나 하마코 자차 카시. So another thing also, so we said that it's in the sutras of the Buddha, but Nagarjuna also proposes this example. And remember that Nagarjuna was prophesied by the Buddha himself, that the Buddha said, several hundred years after my passing away, one who is like a second Buddha will come. And this was Nagarjuna. So his words are also very important. So if we use this example in the way it's intended, to comprehend exactly how difficult it is to be able to achieve a human rebirth, especially with the freedoms and advantages, then it's like we have no choice but to make the most of it. So it's like you have the perfect piece of equipment for a task that you need to do sitting in your house. If you never actually use that equipment to perform the task, but just kind of leave it there to rust, that would be very foolish. So our situation is similar. Yeah, so Geshe said that Nagarjuna, he puts like extra weight on his words, because Nagarjuna was like one of the few philosophers that was prophesied by the Buddha himself. He said, 400 years after my passing, there will be this person who I said to Geshe, because we were saying, is it 400 or 900? Maybe somebody in the audience knows, feel free. It is 400, yes. 400 years after my passing, Nagarjuna would manifest, right? And so in the Buddhist Sutra, it also says, he will be born in the southern part of India. he will engage in these types of deeds and these studies and practices to establish the doctrine of the Buddha, right? So he was very well prophesized in the sutras.
로 그자기질 파파 투메세 하지 그래스.
right,
왔다
right.
디거스는 세좀 비거다 대바침보 세좀 먹어. 나와도 민들이 지는 여보서 그래스.
Papa Tome Rwa. So then it's the 900 years is a Sangha, right? So 400 years, a Sangha. So Nagarjuna is prophesied by the Buddha, 900 years, a Sangha, who was also a very important Mahayana philosopher, who also kind of clarified the Chitta mantra, or mind-only school of tenets.
연벌을 걸어 아마바 이 말에 아마비 다와데 사바 야슈 침보지 알아봤어. 대단해봐. 시대선제.
So Nagarjuna is known as a trailblazer. The Tibetan word is actually Shingta Sulje. So So I want to tell you this word that Geshe used, Shingta Sulje, because normally I think people just say trailblazer, but a Shingta is a chariot, and a Sulje, as I understand it, is like the road that that chariot is going to follow. So they are called the openers of the chariot way. That's what the word means. And so Nagarjuna and a Sangha, they both have this title as openers of the chariot way.
파파 투메 베비깔 파파 투메 걸어 아마바레스. 이나요 그 시대선제야 세좀 시대선제 말레스.
So a paradox here, a Sangha is said to have held the Madhyamika or middle way view, but he opened the chariot way. In other words, he clarified the intent of the Chitta mantra or mind-only school.
손지가 뜻하라 뜻하침보 시요하라 왔어. 나 이나요 시대선제 니마도 요 말레스.
And another interesting thing is that we talk about 4 schools of philosophical tenets in Buddhism, but we only talk about 2 trailblazers, 2 openers of the chariot way.
아마비 시대선제 세종비 시대선제세 아마도 샤라마이 시대선제 노데비 시대선제세 요 말레스.
So we have an opener of the chariot way of the Madhyamika school, an opener of the chariot way of the Chitta Mantran school, but you don't have any particular person who is considered the opener of the chariot way of the Vaibhasika school or of the Sautantrika school. So why?
소지 공부 존에라 아니 샤라마이 템바도 노데비 템바데 다때 할레비 자치모 뇨요 말레스. 메와다고 쳐요 말레스.
So why is this the reason? Why after the passing of the Buddha was there no opener of the chariot way, no trailblazer for the Vaibhasika, for the Great Exposition School, or for the Sautantrika, for the Sutra School? The reason is because after the passing of the Buddha, these 2 particular philosophical positions had not degenerated, right? They were still understood quite well.
다 이나요 세종비 그랬더니 다 템바도 아니 아마비 다와테 베드 뇨서 왔어.
However, the philosophies of the Chitta Mantran mind only and the Madhyamika or middle way schools, the understanding of those had degenerated, right? They were not being upheld properly.
다때 와사바슈 체르토케데 다 코니피 이자 고고셰게데 이자 다시 되선제.
So to revive them again, to be able to kind of bring forth the mind only and middle way schools in a meaningful way again, that's what a Sangha and Nagarjuna did, and that is why they are known as the trailblazers, as the openers of the chariot way. Yeah, so long story short, Nagarjuna is somebody who we should give, really heavier import to, because he's really seen as the second Buddha and was prophesied. And Shantideva says, the Buddha declared that like a turtle that perchance can place its head within a yoke adrift upon a shoreless sea, this human rebirth is difficult to find. Gyamso Cherieng sena Gyamso di Kandesagure Sodram 요마레. Well, example in 차창원 비잠소다.
야 자소 체조 되게 한 점을 된다. 뭐다니 시대 파가 지금
요마레 그 차창원다. Yeah, so just drawing your attention here to the term shoreless. The shoreless sea means you think it's like a sea that is so vast it would cover a whole planet, right? It doesn't have a shore.
어딘데 봐지 다 같이 시작해 봐. 이제용 줄로제 샤완 정보라 세마도와 춰가이 배동 하고서 배는데 제마치 왔도와이나
Yep.
어때 고대고 말아와 세마 하고서
Yes, 하고서
어때는 제마세를 노징에 계속 뭐시 입어서
tema 하고서 beans.
어때
So the difficulty of obtaining human birth is also compared to that of getting dried peas thrown at a smooth wall to stick to it, or that of balancing a pile of peas on the tip of an upright needle. So Geshe is saying that, like, if you throw the inside part of some beans or some peas at a wall, how likely are they to stick to that wall? Pretty unlikely, right?
This one, that in the 카 카제 제드 때발라 세마 뿌종 레레종요 차가이 베 아까서와 냥엘레 뇽딜레 숨바 소지 체는 시바샤고스.
So, or that of balancing a pile of peas on the tip of an upright needle, which is hard enough with even one single pea. It is important to know these comparisons, which are from the Nirvana Sutra and similar ones in other texts. So Geshe said, think about putting one pea on a needle, right? Yeah. So like if you had like a handful of beans or peas or something, dropped them on like while you're holding a needle, how likely is it that one of them is going to sit atop that needle? That is pretty unlikely. Yeah. And so the Nirvana Sutra, if folks are interested, I don't know if you're interested or not, maybe put in the chat if you're interested. I can provide a link to this sutra. We can put it on our website so that people can read that if they like. So we've now finished the section on images or examples of the difficulty of finding a precious human rebirth. So now we come to the next section, which is reflecting on numerical comparisons.
Yeda chemi kama zola tando nyime kama zom tando chemi kama zola dendi nyime kama zole mepa sumba ton.
When you consider the relative numbers of different kinds of beings, you can appreciate that to be born human is hardly possible at all. By way of illustration, it is said that if the inhabitants of the hells were as numerous as stars in the night sky, the pretas would be no more numerous than the stars visible in the daytime. That if there were as many pretas as stars at night, there would only be as many animals as stars in the daytime. And that if there were as many animals as stars at night, there would only be as many gods and humans as stars in the daytime.
So Geshe
said he thinks this analogy is not going to be so easy for us to comprehend, except the last part. Why? Because most beings in the animal realm, and certainly human beings, these are beings that we can see with our eyes, right? Yeah. So it's easy for, like, so for example, say that you're gardening, right? And you accidentally lift up a rock where there's an ant nest. And you sometimes see thousands of ants just underneath that rock. And that way you can understand that, like, if you think, insects are part of the animal realm, how animals would be much more numerous than human beings. Yeah. Right. So it's, and then we just have this kind of comparison that, like, if we think of animals and we compare those to, for example, pretas, the animals would be like stars we can see in the day when the sun is still shining. That's very few stars usually, right? And then the pretas, the hungry ghosts, would be like the stars at night, right? And then we take that to the next level. If we think about the pretas compared to those beings in the hell realms, right? In terms of numbers, the pretas would be like those stars we see when it's still daylight out compared to the stars we see at night. So it's a comparative illustration.
Oh, that means that it may be a sewer was any big Togiam, just Jengyambala Tiene, Jengyamba should trouble more, she get it. They eat more, is that our more.
So Geshe said that the principle here is just that we think of beings who, you know, their mental and physical engagements are extremely negative. And when the negative outweighs the positive, then one is born in those unfavorable realms. And when we think that, you know, most beings are, you know, kind of more dominated, their experience dominated by unwholesome minds and actions, then it makes sense that they are born in unfortunate realms with more frequency.
There's a cover it. I want to vision do us. They can carry in us. Kotachi Moziva is.
Yeah,
Jimatari did see what it was. Yeah, how levy. Kalekavo Dishu shoot Toboji Majena. Naman was.
So yeah. So Geshe and I are always nervous about presenting this part of the text. But anyways, here we go. So if you think about the different hell realms, one of them is known as Avicii. Avicii is known as the hell without respite. And it is said that there's relatively fewer sentient beings that are born there. One of Geshe's friends was wondering, like, because usually, like, as the realm gets worse, the number of beings born there is greater, but that's not the case with Avicii. So why is this so? So Geshe's friend was thinking that it's like a lot of people do bad things, but there's only very few people who do like really terrible, horrible things. And because there's only a few beings that are doing really terrible, horrible things, that's why the worst of those lower realms has relatively fewer inhabitants.
Oh, that and it is was. What an attack on the Geshe Chaimbas, Sunji Javala, near Jubicala, and a Momo Yobicala.
The Lungse Peshitan.
You get in yet. Sunji Momo, Chishian de Yobicatila.
Allelos.
Only you don't watching is. Right.
So also remember the story that Geshe said he shared before of when the Buddha was giving a dharma teaching and some local people had come to listen, and then they saw an assembly of pretas, of hungry ghosts, approaching the teaching site. They were so terrified that they all got up and began to run away, and the Buddha said, "Do not run away, do not fear them. These are all your close connections, your close relatives."
And so
what we actually have to do is bring them in our compassion and dedicate the merits of this teaching so that they may have enough to eat and drink. That is very important. Yeah. So also, Geshe said another thing we can take away from this story. It's pretty unusual for us to be able to see hungry ghosts or pretas. But, you know, if we were able to, this would be what the holy beings would instruct in terms of how to interact with them. And so so one of His Holiness the Dalai Lama's two main teachers, Dza Rinpoche, it was said that during his teachings, you know, on several occasions, hungry ghosts would approach. So it's not such an unheard of thing. So this particular hungry ghost was a student of the previous Dza Rinpoche in their prior life. And so they came to him begging him to dedicate some merits because they hadn't been able to have anything to eat or drink for like a month. So Dza Rinpoche thought to benefit the preta with the dharma, but he said, no, first please dedicate some merit so that I can have something to eat, because I haven't been able to eat for a month.
좀바도 메모게 좀바도 다 야라와스 그게 잡이갈 코 가기 지금 뭐です 그래서 뭐 제가 샤텐 되네라 방어서 비갈 그러니까 메스 사와는지 고소 그러 먼저
메사와 남신sana.
좀바였을 메요라와
Yeah.
메고 돌아파 아주 갈라사와는지 계속 됐어.
Ale Drimadira. So what happened was Trijang Rinpoche recited a ritual for offering smells to the spirits. And then at the end, he put a little bit of tsampa, a little bit of barley flour, and sprinkled it on a butter lamp that was sitting near him. And the hungry ghost actually like put his face right into that butter lamp, right into the flame to be able to consume the smell.
그렇도 뭐 그렇잘 차소 잡아이는 거 좋아치 가기면 됐어. 단 demandene 다 차소 말레베 갈때네 거파 먼저 갈라사와는지 계속 됐어.
So what happened is he approached, right? And the tsampa was there. And Trijang Rinpoche kind of continued to sprinkle it, I guess, over the flame. I guess it's quite a big butter lamp or maybe some kind of flame. And at first, he wasn't able to do anything. It was only when Trijang Rinpoche came to the end of the recitation of the ritual that he was able to sort of dive in and benefit from that sustenance. So not easy to see or interact with these beings, but for some kind of elevated practitioners, right, it is possible. So whether we think about the ants, whether we think about the human beings who kind of scuttle about going back and forth and in similar ways, they only do that for one reason, right? They do that because they are hoping to achieve the causes of happiness. So when we observe them scuttling about, what can we understand? We can understand that deep within their minds is a wish not to suffer and to be able to achieve happiness. So much of what they do is aimed solely to that. Yeah. Right. And so Geshe said, you also remember the story of Vasubandhu when he was reciting texts, right? A bird that was nesting very close to where he dwelled, it would sit there and listen to the recitation. And after it passed away, it was able to be reborn as Vasubandhu's student. Yeah. Right. And as you probably know, if you've heard the story before, when he was reborn as the student, he was able to understand the first half of that text very well, but not so much the second half, because he would fall asleep during the afternoon when Vasubandhu would recite the second half of that text. So it's very important for us in that stable way to put those imprints. To take form as any being, it is also said that there are as many beings in hell as specks of dust in the whole world, as many pretas as particles of sand in the Ganges, as many animals as grains in a beer barrel, and as many asuras as snowflakes in a blizzard, but that gods and humans are as few as the particles of dust on a fingernail. To take form as any being of the higher realms is already rare enough, but rarer still is a human life complete with all the freedoms and advantages. We can see for ourselves at any time how few human beings there are compared to animals. Think how many bugs live in a clod of earth in summertime, or ants in a single anthill. There are hardly that many humans in the whole world. But even within mankind, we can see that compared to all those people born in outlying regions where the teachings have never appeared, those born in places where the dharma has spread are exceedingly rare. And even among these, there are only a very few who have all of the freedoms and advantages. Gawa gomo, right? Nansu di ser dapochi di josun jomason.
Karser.
Nansu kawaye, sorry. Right. Oh, yes, right. So here we go. With all these perspectives in mind, you should be filled with joy that you really have all the freedoms and advantages complete. A human life can be called a precious human life only when it is complete with all the aspects of the freedoms and advantages, and from then onwards it truly becomes precious. But as long as any of those aspects are incomplete, however extensive your knowledge, learning, and talent in ordinary ways may be, you do not have a precious human life. You have what is called an ordinary human life, mere human life, hapless human life, meaningless human life, or human life returning empty-handed. It is like failing to use a wish-fulfilling gem despite holding it in your hands, or returning empty-handed from a land full of precious gold. So Geshe said you can think about holding that jewel in terms of the confidence you have when you go to your next life. So all of us are going to have to face the end of this life, and all of us are going to have to go into the next life. If when that time comes, we can have the confidence of thinking, I tried as much as possible to cultivate what is virtuous and wholesome. I trained in the hearing, contemplation, and meditation of the teachings. As much as possible, I engaged with the meaning of those teachings. Then, when that transition happens, we can go with a mind that is peaceful and relaxed. And that is really something that is like a precious jewel. So, of course, having realizations of these various positive mental qualities, that's difficult, right? It's difficult to get there. But if we can do our best to bring forth love, to bring forth compassion, to bring forth bodhicitta, to bring forth emptiness, right? Even though it's not easy, if we continuously try to engage, then when we come to the end time of our life here, we'll have that confidence knowing I engaged really with these wholesome and positive things, and I have a very good chance at having a precious human rebirth. That is something really valuable and rare. Right. So for one who has become cultivated in practice, one who is a holy being, then going from one life to the next, it just becomes like an experience of a child coming home after a long time. So what we want to do then, just like what's realistic for us, we want to live our life in a way that we will have as few regrets as possible. That's what we want to do.
다 가시 던지 셰면 다 던지 tumban도 노지다 마치나 가게 앞에 제마토나
Yeah.
노버 글리던도 노버지 좀 말하네 다 tumban도 그시는 다 세나 쳔모라와스.
If we don't take the opportunity to change and the regrets continue to pile up and pile up and pile up, then by the time we come to the end of this life, we will be like a person. We will be like a person who returned from the Jewel Island empty-handed, right? We won't have gotten much use out of it.
다 주고 치모는도 때모 간가 다시 쉬어야르더니 나 있어서 지주라 나한테는 말아.
So it's like if there's like if you it's like similarly if you go to a big department store where everything is on sale, but you don't make use of it and you don't buy anything that you need, right? You haven't benefited from that.
저게도 멀리르지냐바는 노번예비 도마이 쇼시메비 만노지 두제시바 통라서 라마 도만자완데 자시토비 도마이 미게메비 만노 뇽조시바 통라서 세세 돈바시반데 데베토비 도마이 니제메비 만노지 그도 풍바 통라서 지데옹거토반데 콜레지 도마이 도세메비 만노지 칠라가와 통라서 세니 롱고 통한다 소지통이 도마이 니레메비 만노 To
come across a precious jewel is nothing compared to finding this precious human life. Look how those who are not saddened by samsara fritter life away. To win a whole kingdom is nothing compared to meeting a perfect teacher. Look how those with no devotion treat the teacher as their equal. To be given command of a province is nothing compared to receiving the bodhisattva vows. Look how those with no compassion hurl their vows away. To rule over the universe is nothing compared to receiving a tantric empowerment. Look how those who do not keep the samayas jettison their promises. To catch sight of the Buddha is nothing compared to seeing the true nature of the mind. Look how those with no determination sink back into their delusions. So Geshe says he's not going to comment much further here because these things are self-evident, right? But we have to really just have this recognition that having this human rebirth is like finding this wish-fulfilling jewel, and we want to live according to if we do not, having achieved this precious human life, which is like a jewel, engage in these activities to work towards achieving the bliss of liberation, then we are returning from that jewel island empty-handed.
So Geshe
realizes that this particular section of the text is maybe not so easy. It's pretty heavy, but what it is trying to do is to direct us on the correct path so that when we come to the end of our time here, we have taken the essence, we have taken something meaningful from this human life. So continuing, these freedoms and advantages do not come by chance or coincidence. They are the result of an accumulation of merit and wisdom built up over many kalpas. The great scholar Dza said, this free and favored human existence is not the result of your resourcefulness. It comes from the merit you have accumulated. Right. Yeah, so this human rebirth isn't something that you can like kind of get the causes for like a good businessman. It's not about like sort of being confident, being clever, anything like that, right? It comes about through only the wholesome causes, the virtuous karma that we accumulate. To have obtained human life only to be wholly involved in evil activities without the least notion of dharma is to be lower than the lower realms, as Jetsun Mila said to the hunter Gumpo Dorje. To have the freedoms and fortunes of human birth is usually said to be precious, but when I see someone like you, it doesn't seem precious at all. Nothing has as much power to drag you down to the lower realms as human life.
Jimala Ripe Gojana, Tapino, Total, no de Vicala, and it's magic shower Daniela,
Right.
Shawanese Daniel, Taco, the Langrovas, kitchen shower Daniel.
Yeah.
Koro Medaka Dangro. That the boy shower the Lenny Jimala out there. Did Jiro Chitalan is Corosate there. The new copy medaless was and Jimalitan that the lava is.
So Geshe said this particular advice from Lord Milarepa to the hunter Gumpo Dorje, this happened so Milarepa, of course, most of his time spent in retreat. So he was meditating in his cave. And then outside his cave, he saw this hunter approaching, chasing a deer. He called upon the deer and, because of his powers, I guess the deer was attracted to him and then sat beside him. The hunter continued to search for the deer, followed his tracks and followed those tracks into Milarepa's cave. At the moment that he arrived and sat down in front of Milarepa and the deer, these are the words that Milarepa said to him. Actually, through receiving that advice and through receiving Milarepa's blessing, the hunter Gumpo Dorje was able to enter into the door of Dharma and become a very cultivated practitioner.
That's what
Yeah, so Geshe said that this is probably, he's not 100% sure, but this is probably like a real person, like Gumpo Dorje, a real person who became one of Milarepa's disciples. Right. Yeah. So it's kind of like a lament, right? That you have this human rebirth, and we've talked about how important and how difficult it is to get. But when you kind of fritter it away by doing these evil activities, right? It's as if it's not precious at all.
Yeah,
so, look at the state of our world today. Look at who's causing the most problems in the world, who's fighting wars, who are developing more and more efficient ways of killing sentient beings, right? It's human beings that are doing that, right? So those are people who are treating it as if a human rebirth is not something precious at all. Right. So the next part of that I forgot. So Geshe said, there's many animals that from that perspective are more ethical because they're doing a lot less harm than some of the human beings. And so, in many cases, we see that the conduct of humans is much worse than of those born in the animal realm.
Lese tabi tazi lindayi nyena koi tido lindayi gedi kanju yopo lindayi shesu locho rewe
locho
dina nge seno de nge so seno je tele tari tanjo choje de demi malishi nye pandala nyimbo tombi hachishi malemba chen de togi donji de chije debe ngola tanjo teme de se de chiga zhongla tabana for machine the mama lepa yite shenjule the ritawanya jene da ge go machine ndile lawa jeme ndile mumba jeme to shisu
Gonda Junju drawing. It is through the power of all the merit you have accumulated in the past that you have now obtained this human life, complete with its 18 freedoms and advantages. To neglect the one essential thing, the supreme dharma, and instead just spend your life acquiring food and clothes and indulging the 8 worldly concerns would be a useless waste of those freedoms and advantages. How ineffectual to wait until death is upon you and then beat your breast with remorse, for you will have made the wrong choice. As it says in the way of the bodhisattva, thus having found the freedoms of a human life, if I now fail to train myself in virtue, what greater folly could there be? How more could I betray myself?
Oda mele litza chemo ndijito. Oda shewa ne shewa la kangen ndogi, shewa la deshi dewa la ndogi. Soso la pala yo, ronda wo yo hares.
So you have the freedom, having achieved this human life, right? You have this extraordinary freedom to decide whether your conduct is going to ensure that you go from happy rebirth to happy rebirth in samsara, or whether your conduct is going to bring you to the unfortunate realms.
No ri tu no ni tama to chesho, nipa chesho te mogizo togere, te tanda zoki te chala te soso duas.
So about of the 6 different types of beings that inhabit samsara, the one who has the most power to determine their future destiny through their actions is the one who is born as a human being.
Mai se te de mai li za chemo de soso la pala yo, mai yanda ke ta soso yabo tempo chena, mai yanda ngoko to togo mares.
Right. So if with this human rebirth, you have this human brain, this human intelligence, then you are capable of determining your own actions and future destiny. You cannot be cheated by that.
Ta ina yo ruru soso ke tempo che, ruru soso ke gyawa do, ta pge pita bo ma chena, ruru soso ngoko ko yo hares.
But if you've heard about all of this, and you still decide, right, to engage in negative things, to engage in harmful and unwholesome actions, you can't blame anyone else for that. You are the person who has deceived yourself.
Ngoko tele chegachi, no tele chegachi, munduda jasi chimo shawala kanzul jasi chimo jagdiwas.
So there's no kind of greater folly, there is no kind of greater betrayal or cheating than that. This is what Shantideva is expressing in this verse.
Oh, Yesu, Tina, Tarishawan, the mal leto. Tenyejo, Sonso Yumbi, Tarit send the Cesa Sambashi, Machina, Shani Tando, Shanin, the Nanda, Tawanya Bakashi, Nyasuga, Nerita, Vashena, Chichen Noame, Ulunga Nella, Mugo, Mugo, Wood, and Yaso Matame, Batuan Jawa Yumbi, Tari. Begi no the Joa Seshi Nij Meme Ju Ngowate Tomba Sanji Sambi Gwana Yoto Yoda Goshi Nos Longi.
This present life, therefore, is the turning point at which you can choose between lasting good and lasting evil. If you do not make the use of it right now to seize the citadel of the absolute nature within this lifetime and lives to come, it will be very hard to obtain this freedom again. Once you take birth in any of the forms of life in the lower realms, no idea of dharma will ever occur to you. Too bewildered to know what to do or what not to do, you will fall endlessly further and even further to unfortunate realms. So, telling yourself that now is the time to make an effort, meditate over and over again, applying the 3 supreme methods. Start with the thought of bodhicitta, do the practice itself without any conceptualization, and dedicate the merit at the end. Yeah. Ale. Jorwa?
Seshe tomba.
Simshe tomba.
Nije.
Yeah.
Meme tomba. Ju ngowa tomba.
Right. So Geshe said that, this really connects with a lot of what he shares in every class, right? About the beginning, the middle, and the end. So you start with the thought of bodhicitta. That's the motivation, right? You do the practice itself without any conceptualization. Geshe said you can understand that as distraction, and then you dedicate the merit. So in this way, the session is complete in the beginning, the middle, and the end. So whenever you engage in a wholesome or virtuous activity, keep these 3 points in place. It's very important. So Geshe said, now you see, right, that when he is just saying again and again, important to have the activities complete in the beginning, the middle, and the end. Here, Kunzong Lama Jelung, Words of My Perfect Teacher, is confirming that. Sarnam Yagmandu Dishanatagire. Yeah, so Geshe said just 2 kind of paragraphs left in this chapter, so we will pause it here and we will keep it until next time. Keep you in suspense. Right. So Geshe said, as we were, trying, he really wanted to cover most of this chapter, so we didn't get to Gampopa's text, but we will do some of that next time. So let us dedicate the merits nicely. And so, of course, as always, you are welcome to stay for question and answer. It's often very lively. But if you have things you need to do today, please, of course, feel free to leave. Right. So feel free to leave if you need to. In other words, and Geshe, just adding something here that we talk a lot about like the drawbacks of anger, and in this text also in terms of, you know, how that can affect the opportunity of the human life and things, but there's not always kind of clear examples given about how anger actually, like what the mechanics of it is, how anger actually undermines, degenerates the power of merit to bring forth positive results. So that is why he took quite a lot of time to explain that at the beginning of class today. And so as you kind of contemplate and think about that, right, then you can also come to your own conclusions, develop your own examples about that topic. So we will dedicate the merits. Changjo semjo rinpoche maje banam jejo je jewa nyamba meba yang gone gonde pewa sho toni tawa rinpoche maje banam jejo je jewa nyamba meba yang Gone gonda bewa sho jambe bao jeda kemba no gundu zambo deya deja de deda kungi jesu dalo je gewa dida tamche radamo dusun shebe gewa tamche ke ngowa gamra Chod Severance dagi gewe cawa digu jong zambo jeji rado mowa. So we will pause there. Questions are welcome. Daphne, yes, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Hi.
Hi.
I was wondering, sometimes when you take refuge or when you read certain texts, it says that it protects you from going to the 3 lower realms. But just by reading one text or taking refuge, that seems a bit unlikely. So what does that mean when it says that?
Nganso yung mambo ginanglo la roa kamjo shuna dene nganso di ngensong sumla droya sungkap chegire duas ine yung di tana dene di ngene minjo di chikbola tene ngensong madroya ngene gi nupa yores di kola kande samlo tangore.
Ta tedo mi tende tinse sungyares pena pena shando nyane chene manyona akosara shandi la jatu chene gama sona
Yeah.
ane chewa jima tene ngasolo do ta cheba ji nayo di shando tene pa tene so le te ko anyala chewa ji ni ta kaze ndo to ha ko mare ma to dendol ndo to gres
Dendol ndo to gres and they kamdros and the kamdro gilabja sena perna che kunjo gilabja di semchen nupa ma ke di dang yamdu go gres.
Yeah, that
right.
Yeah,
so Geshe said that this is true, right? That the refuge functions to prevent us from falling into one of the any of the 3 unfortunate realms. But he qualifies that this isn't just merely going for refuge; it's going for refuge and abiding by the advice of refuge. So Geshe and I were talking. I said, like, maybe good to give an example of that. So remember that in the ceremony, when you go for refuge to the dharma jewel, what's the advice for that? Not harming any sentient being whatsoever. So this is what holds. If you have taken refuge and done your best to abide by the advice of refuge, even if you had like a very negative karma, Geshe says the text that he's looked at says that that refuge will prevent you from having that negative karma drag you down into the unfortunate realms for 1 or 2 lifetimes. So yes, but there's a caveat.
This one, or Tashando Korochibo in the pattern.
Yeah. So that's the power of refuge, right? And refuge also means abiding by the advice of refuge, that, you know, even if one hasn't been able to accomplish much in terms of one's practice, just through the power of that refuge, one is protected from going into the unfortunate realms. Loso.
But
we also have to reflect, what does refuge mean, right? It's not just going through the motions. Having refuge means a person with stable faith and confidence in the 3 jewels. And so that's also not something so easy either. So Geshe is reminded of one of the, when His Holiness was younger, he would have kind of an extensive teaching every year for the Tibetan students. And so there would always be an opportunity for the students in the school to ask His Holiness questions. And so then during one of these kind of introduction to Buddhism courses, one of the students asked His Holiness, like, okay, like, we say that as Tibetans, we are Buddhists, but if you ask most Tibetans what the meanings of the 3 jewels is, they're not going to be able to give you a very good answer. So do they actually have refuge or not? So he said, if you don't really know what kind of the ultimate meaning and function of the 3 jewels is, you kind of have refuge, right? And if you kind of have refuge, then you kind of have the benefits. So you can understand it like that. So Geshe was saying that just like mere refuge, just as kind of going through the motions, is not enough. It needs to be a refuge which has stable confidence or faith, which comes from really understanding kind of what the actual 3 jewels are and their function, right? So that is very important.
Yes.
So if on the basis of that understanding, you then have stable faith and follow the advice, then you get the benefits.
Okay. And that's a second question I have as well.
Sure.
Sort of add on. Is there anything you can do extra to make sure that if you happen to be reborn as a human being, that you come in contact with the Dharma at least?
Right. Then so Kewa Jema Milu Rinpoche Tobna Denden Che Tugires Gyudi Kande Sogores. So Kewa Jema Milu Chikpo Mase Di Tokla Denden Sangegi Tempa Tutubia. So Geshe said it's really what was just explained here. That's all you can do, right? Developing a taste and a liking of the Dharma, doing as much as you can to place the virtuous imprints within your mind, and then dedicating the merits, right? So that those imprints are nourished and protected.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. Ale los los dene maumbala tombachon de
어 그렇죠.
chasma.
그거 메도 가면 더
Right, right.
지수송아
Right,
된다
right, right.
그랬어.
Right. So Geshe said, like, you know, we can also make very specific dedications, you know, like, may I become an enlightened being. Gonda ko dejin shepa shakya tupa michik mingyores. Dene ko dejin shepa shakya tupa gewa delatene druptuna kane yapores no monamda busone.
예예예. 대지시 마셔야 되지야지 하는 것만 다 좀 봐.
Right, right, right.
될다. 들으치는 소아다 송아스.
Right, right, right. Okay. So it is said that Shakyamuni Buddha, he prayed to a Tathagata who also had the name Shakya in his name. And this is like many, many, many lifetimes before, right? And then from making that and dedicating the merits to may I become like you, this became one of the causes that shaped his merits to become this wheel-turning Buddha, Shakyamuni.
다 된다 데레스탄다 바쳐 가서 이나 요바지. 저와서 어느 가워지. 실실가 치카리나 될 가워지. 다 디바쳐 디 돌다 타망오야 보잖아. 다 디가 건 뒤로 들어왔어.
So really what we're doing, it's no secret, it's just what was here, right? We're cultivating an awareness and a joy for the Dharma. We are engaging in those wholesome activities to create as many positive imprints as possible. Then we are dedicating that. Really, that's all we can do.
배려이나 요다 뭐냐 분야 뭐 드리지가 나셔와지 셔와네 셔와를 렌데 바포스케스 셔와쇼 사멜로 쳔모자게 대지멜로 릴라버레 여버레 도와스.
So in old Tibet, a lot of, you know, ordinary people, they would make strong prayers. May I be reborn as somebody who accepts and abides by the law of karma. And Geshe said he was very moved by that prayer because that is not such an easy prayer to make.
No, indeed. Thank you. Yeah.
So what keeps us honest is our conviction in the law of cause and effect, in karma. That's what's going to keep us honest in our life.
Yeah, true. Okay. Thank you very much. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no problem, Daphne.
Thank you.
나는 난저 좀블리가 처를 담만다서 안디와스. 렌드가 처를 스치가 줘야 말다스.
Right.
소설레가 따다 노거마.
So His Holiness the Dalai Lama, he said that, like, there's a lot of people who make laws in the world, right? All of these politicians that are lawmakers.
Yeah.
Cause and effect or karma is not a law.
No.
Cause and effect of karma is simply how nature functions, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so thanks, Daphne, and I see Donna. I see Donna, you have your hand up, so go ahead, Donna. Yeah.
I do, but I think Manoshi was before me. Do you want to go?
Oh, was she? I can never see the
You
hand
see.
on Manoshi's screen because she has a yellow background, and the color of the hand is like a Homer Simpson color, so I can never
Thanks,
see it. But anyway, sorry about that, Manoshi. Go ahead.
No problem. It does kind of go with Daphne's question, so if that's okay.
Yeah, no worries.
So no, and perhaps you've spoken about this before in the past, but I thought it'd be interesting to revisit it in context of Daphne's question. But you know, in terms of refuge and the being the English term, and maybe this is, I don't know who this question more for, but and in English, we often hear the word refuge versus, I guess the literal translation is definite emergence. I understand from you, Ngodrup.
No, that's renunciation, Manoshi. Renunciation
that
is
I'm getting confused.
Emergence.
Right.
Yes.
So
however,
refuge, yes.
You bring forth an interesting point because Kyamdro, so I said to Geshe, I said, I don't want to like jump in because it's his class, but yes, I can explain this. So Kyamdro is so Nyenjung, Nye is definite, and Jung is to emerge. Like, think about, it's almost like you're swimming, you're doing a breaststroke, and you emerge out of the water. That's really kind of the evocative image of the Tibetan word. I don't feel like renunciation gives that evocative image personally. Like I feel it's kind of like, it just gives me a real Abrahamic feel. Not that there's anything wrong with Abrahamic, but it's just, that's not what we're doing in Buddhism, right? So with Kyamdro, refuge in the sense of protection, it's a little bit better. I don't think it's as off the mark as renunciation is for definite emergence. But if you want to talk about what the Tibetan word literally means, right? Kyamdro is like a safe direction. Dro means to go, means to follow. It's like follow in a safe direction. So that's how Berzin translates it. So I don't know if that's helpful, but you can also translate refuge as safe direction, just like you can translate renunciation as definite emergence.
Oh, that's very interesting. Okay, sorry. Thanks for
No worries, no
clearing up
worries.
the
Yes,
confusion,
no.
but that is
my
interesting.
Yeah, like,
Shandro,
yeah. Again,
Shandro sen rewa jasha ja.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Geshe said the safe direction or the refuge is achieved where 100% of your hope and confidence, you're putting that in the 3 jewels. That's the measure of having it fully.
강행에 트레그리 트레치 나졌다 뭐야 뭐지 시고 덤바스 깔아 놓고 야레스.
Yeah.
강에 트레비칼 샹돌 레와 마시와 테 옌다칠 레와 추초자데 샹데 템보시라 메타레스.
So like a sign that maybe our refuge is not like at that measure of the complete refuge is when we have a lot of difficulties, is our instinct to go for refuge to the 3 jewels, or are we doing something else? Are we praying to something else, or are we trying to figure out another place to go for safety?
ngine china nganzo nojin lekachi na yo. Ota kange do ta tndi karina yabo chayala shandro de yini ngine zone ta te zoji te yares.
So actually, Geshe said it doesn't mean that you don't also seek advice elsewhere, right? That's not what we're saying, but it just means that somebody who has a stable refuge, an indication of that is when they're going through the really rough times, when they're facing really the difficult problems, right? Like they have this in like on the impulse level to turn to the 3 jewels.
Tani shatu lega mo cha yar. Was shandro ting yeso dunga cha tho yon tsendi kange tende sha ko nipa yar.
So if, as we said, connected with the previous question, right? If refuge is able to protect us from falling into the 3 unfortunate states of existence, then we should be confident that refuge is going to help us deal with whatever problem we're facing in front of us, right?
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome, Manoshi. You're welcome.
I
think, yeah, thanks so much. So Donna, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Oh, great. Okay, thank you very much for the teaching today. So my comment, more than a question, follows on from Daphne's as well. Growing up in Theravada Buddhism and steeped in generations of Theravada Buddhism, we're taught very clearly that we can't simply cleanse away our negative karma, right? We have to live through the consequences of our actions. What we can do in this life is live virtuously and create good karma. So to me, this whole idea of cleansing away our negative actions sounds very Catholic. When I hear it, right, that you go and confess and you're all good now. I know there are exceptions in Buddhism, like Angulimala, but we're taught that those are exceptions. It was the time of the Buddha, and they worked really hard. For someone like me, who cannot reach the level of an arahant, it's going to be difficult if I murdered someone to come and do a bit of a cleansing chant and be okay. So without disrespect, because obviously we're all Buddhists, it's all the same, except for these little differences in ritual.
Well, to be fair, I think the example you're thinking of, Donna, is, and you confirm to me if I'm getting you wrong, but you're thinking maybe of the story that Geshe's told, which is of King Mahindra, right, who killed his father, but he was still able to achieve the state of an arahat through purifying. But I don't think it was like he just did one chant one time and he was good. Like I think it took a little bit more than that. But
no, I know there are exceptions like that where people really, really worked, like even Angulimala, right? And King Mahindra.
Yes, right, of course.
Really work. So I guess my question is, sometimes when I hear, it wasn't something that Geshe said, or nothing coming up from today. It's generally something, maybe I have got the Mahayana beliefs wrong, something that has been quite new and unusual to me, where I've heard of cleansing mantras. And I thought, wow, that's so different to what I was taught, that no matter whatever we did, we have to live with the negative karmic consequences, unless you're very special in terms of your discipline and perseverance, and you can, really work hard, which I'm not going to reach, right?
I got you. Yeah,
so I was just thinking of your views.
It's a very good question. And honestly, Donna, it's one that I've had too. And let me just, because when I was in Thailand, I think I also learned this, like that if you do like one of the 5 uninterrupted karmas, like you kill your mother or you kill your father or something, like there's like basically nothing you can do except kind of go to hell and live through the karmic reaction to that. And then after the karmic reaction burns out, you can kind of hope to do better, basically, right?
Yeah, and it's for us, it's with a lot of not just the 5 terrible karmic actions, it's across. But so the way I would see my life, I was brought up to see my life, okay, I've got bad karma from the past, but in this, I still have to live it out in the future, in this life, but I have to try and live virtuously.
Yeah.
And so that once that burns off, then I will create better conditions.
So you can kind of dilute it. You can pour like fresh water into the salt water, but you're not going to just be able to get rid of the salt, basically.
Okay, yeah, that was my understanding. Yeah.
Kind of like that? Is that, did I get it?
Yeah, I think so. And I was just wondering what your views were, and because I've heard this now and again, just to find out whether in Mahayana that really is a belief that if I do a chant, which will be amazing, if I could do a chant every day, I can get rid of all my negative karma.
Yeah, no. It's a good question, Donna. So I will try to put this to Geshe. If the answer is something you feel is missing, feel free to circle back and I'll get some clarification.
Thank you for listening, because that was a long way of trying to explain that.
No, but I think it's a good point, and especially as we have the Vajrasattva coming up next month, I think it's actually a timely point as well. Nganso ngama di ko tekme rwa nyentu tekpagi nampare dua dene korongso chugi nanglolaya halepe dipajiko tsapochik sana so dipa digi jebu dapochik nyongore matok soye dapochik duas perna nganso tsa gichuyana nganso tsa mepe chu teslu tugiresi ne tsa pet mepa soye yomares rwa ine tek chengi nanglolaya perna nganso dorji sempagi ngak chik sana dene dipa chatsangwa pet me drogi res tending aron so jebudi tuguma res kodi kelenya tets kale kapure duas karin said di dempa yena dene jesui rang res karin said dipa katsu sana di tsik kashe pyorne dene mepa so tugire duas ine korongi chiwa dire tekshengi nanglola roa dene di nak dang nyambo densola tene dipa jiko tsapo katsu yena yang mepa so tugire bes di dempare bes di dempa yina yang dene di tomba chom dende ngansu di bachula tene mepa so tugyo mares di mitumba mares morangi chiwa di da bochi gre disa
me ta te de dembores te me no la di chome leina ini mini di manwa la costa matos ni yares dembores.
So Geshe said that he thinks you're very correct about what Theravada is teaching. He's not familiar with all of the Theravada scriptures, but the one that he's familiar with, he thinks it states very clearly one of these 5 uninterrupted karmas, so killing one's father, killing one's mother, drawing blood from a Buddha, and so forth, that these lead to a lower rebirth in the unfortunate realms, and that's what it means by uninterrupted. In the next life, you're going there, and there's not anything you can really do about it. So if you look at the text of the Theravada tradition, in particular the Vinaya Suttas, or the suttas on monastic discipline, this is the teaching, and that is absolutely correct, as it is stated there. Yeah. However, as you look at the Mahayana Sutras, the Mahayana canon, it teaches that with great effort, even one of these 5 uninterrupted negative karmas can be purified. Geshe wants to make it clear it's not just through reciting a few Vajrasattva mantras that is achieved. It's through repeated engagement with the Vajrasattva mantra, for example, combined with the 4 opponent powers. The 4 opponent powers really need to be in place for the recitation to be successful in purifying.
So if
Geshe says that, like, he thinks like the holy beings want to encourage us to practice, right? So when the holy beings talk about the benefits of the Vajrasattva mantra, for example, they say that, if you like recite 100,000 of this, then you purify however many eons of negative karma and all of that. So that's a benefit, but for that benefit to be actualized, it has to be combined with these 4 opponent powers, which include, like, one of them is regret for the action, and the other one is to promise not to do the action again. So when these 4 opponent powers are in place, then the potential of the mantra is unlocked. In the absence of that, no, he wouldn't say so.
다 된다 랭가 차송와 다세 개점만 처음에 레이나요. 하고서는 다 된다 대바 니 내서라 나도 가르치려고 했으나 도만이도 존지 세검도 관에 열레피도 하고잖아. 다 된다 더 돼요.
So Geshe said that's the caveat that he would give in terms of these purification practices, that those have to be conjoined, right, with these 4 opponent powers. And, you could have one instance of an uninterrupted karma being purified by that, with all of that in place. But even more kind of remarkable than that, Geshe would say, is that in the Mahayana teachings, right, a realization of bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment, or a realization of shunyata, emptiness, because the power of that realization is so overwhelmingly positive, such a realization is said to clear away negative karma completely.
그래서 다 대소지 롱게 수임바 레라 다 그로 보기에서 가서 잡고 마시다 그로 배다 테메가 돌로터 봤더니 무슨 될 슈아레
아니 전부 뭐요 버디 가데스 미몽보 세모정화로
다 대원다고 왔어.
So Geshe said that it's through those practices of purification, but even more through the realization of emptiness and bodhicitta, that negative karma is completely cleared away. And that's how, when you have like the story of Mahindra killed his father, he was able to achieve the state of an arahant. And also by, for example, Angulimala, who Dana mentioned, right? That's why he was able to become an arahant even after killing, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dana, I think it was 999 people, right? So it was because of his realization, actually. And remember also the story of Milarepa, right? Who, in an act of revenge for an injustice to his family, he learned kind of like worldly magic. So he conjured up a hailstorm that killed dozens of people in his home village. And he was able to become enlightened, even having done that. Yeah. So when Milarepa first met his teacher, he prayed to me like, please speak a really deep and sublime dharma, because I need it, because I have like seriously heavy sinful karma. And if you read his story, you'll see that his process of purification was not something easy at all. In fact, if you read his story, you're wondering to yourself, like, how did he endure that? But through that practice, through following his teacher, he was able to abandon negativity and purify and reach the state of enlightenment. So Geshe would answer the question in a capsule. So to sum up, he would say that the purification of one of the 5 actions of immediate retribution is possible in Mahayana Buddhism. However, it is not easy.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Thanks for explaining the Mahayana position.
Okay. Yeah, yes, no, you're welcome, Dana. And feel free to ask back if there's more you want to clarify.
No, that was really clear.
Okay, awesome.
Thank you.
Great. So I think Donna's question is covered. Anyone else? Dave, is there anybody online, or shall we call it a day? So Geshe said that the main advice to Mahindra was to purify with these ritual practices. That was part of the advice, but the main advice was to meditate on and realize emptiness. And that's how that full purification was possible. Sorry, Dave, you're about to say something. Was there a question on social?
There are no questions on social media. But yeah, what comes to mind is Geshe mentioned the four opponent powers. I would love for him to speak at length on those.
I think if I am not remembering incorrectly, maybe I shouldn't divulge the contents of our So the Buddha said to King Mahindra that if you realize sublime emptiness, then sins and obscurations, how could they become a cause of lower rebirth? So they will definitely be cleared away. Right. So the Buddha said this to Mahindra directly. So in answer to Dave's question, sorry, I said I shouldn't dissolve the contents of our meeting, but I think what we agreed is that the Sunday we would have the Vajrasattva initiation. The following Sunday, Geshe would focus on the four opponent powers and purification. That's what I remember. So I think this is coming. Yeah.
Advertising.
Yes, advertising. Exactly. Yeah, I think so. So if there's no questions on social, then so if there's no questions on social, let us end here. Thank you everybody for joining us this Sunday. It was fun, and maybe we see you next week.
Thank you, and thank you for all the questions, everyone.
Thanks. Yes, great questions today. Take care.
Thank you so much.
Be happy, everybody. Enjoy your Sunday.
Thank you, Geshe. Thank you.